Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another round of epic and enthralling racing action in the one and only UKSimRacing GT3 Championship Season 16 as brought to you on the premier SimRacing platform available only on PC known as iRacing and proudly hosted by SimRacing International. It is time for round number 7 of 10 and we have made our way to the South American continent for the Brazilian circuit of Interlagos, known in full as the Autódromo José Carlos Pache after the national motorsporting hero. It is a circuit that many international calendars would not do without, particularly when it's hosted right at the end of a championship calendar. Spanning the best part of what is 2.67 miles and consisting of 15 corners, it is a circuit that winds its way through the local hilly terrain of São Paulo city in an anti-clockwise fashion. Indeed, unlike many circuits around the world, it goes in the opposite direction, and that puts stresses on drivers immediately with regards to there being more left-handers than there are right-handers. However, look underneath the cover and you'll find the stresses are only amplified when you consider corner variety. There's sweepers, there's chicanes, and there's hairpins, plenty of overtaking opportunities, plenty of extended straights, and it means for our drivers here they've got to keep their wits about them because they could otherwise be vulnerable to an overtake, and even one small mistake could see them fall onto the grass and take a long time to recover. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this post-round broadcast live from circuit side for your viewing pleasure. That's right, you're tuned today on the YouTube channel of SimRacing International, the one and only place you can catch all the racing action. Go to youtube.com and search for SRI or SimRacing International, and you could be tuning in there. Indeed, joining a number of fellow spectators as we get ready to get the racing underway once again. Now, this is a post-round broadcast, so the racing action you are seeing is not live itself. It occurred back on Sunday, the 9th of November 2025, while on this fine Wednesday evening, the 12th of November 2025, we're bringing it to you as if it were live. That means here in the commentary booth, we do not know what happens, whether it be the practice session, which has just completed, the qualifying session that's currently underway, or alternatively the race, which is only a few moments away, and therefore it's as close as possible to the raw live viewing experience for you guys and girls at home. And as always, we do ask, if you happen to know the outcome of the racing, please do not put any spoilers in the chat, not just for us here in the commentary booth, but most importantly for the guys and girls tuning in at home who'll be looking to make sure that they don't have their experience spoiled from start to finish. In the commentary booth, you have myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Britain as Bit, depending on what media you follow me on. Now we bring you all your racing action as it unfolds over the entirety of the season. And speaking of our schedule for tonight, times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinate Time, UTC, in approximately 6 minutes time at 7:10 this evening in UK time, we will be going racing for the 7th time this season. And goodness me, what a season it has been so far, and we've got a lot of big questions to ask today. But coming into this round then, let's give you a recap of how we've got here, starting off with our calendar of course. Because last time out we were in the US of A for the second of 3 visits for this season at the Sebring International Raceway, and in round number 6 on the 2nd of November, well, what a set of stories we had there. Because in terms of our winners, well, in the elite class, the ongoing back and forth battle between Richard Simnor and Joe Nathan saw Richard Simnor then take the victory only by a slender margin, and whilst Nathan was always right behind, he couldn't quite beat Simnor's strategy, and in the end the Ford Mustang of Simnor was able to reign supreme on home soil. Meanwhile in the pro class, Mikey Storey had an absolute defensive masterclass which he put on, and also in the end did a fantastic job with strategy and was able to make sure that nobody could find a way through no matter how hard they pushed. Whereas in the Premier class it was all about strategy, and we got to see a maiden win of the season for Hendrik Zilka, who pulled off an absolutely incredible piece of work, and along the way had Robin Paunier come with him to take second place. Indeed, Paunier making his way onto the podium for the first time this season and almost taking the win. Whereas in the Evo class, it was Simon Hartley who, don't make any mistakes, took his second win of the season, albeit it was in the hands of Thomas Weston for so long, but Weston in the end came into difficulty right towards the end of the race, and Simon Hartley was the one who picked up the pieces when everybody else seemed to drop the ball. But here we are then in Brazil for the Autódromo José Carlos Pache, and after this round we're making our way to Japan for the Suzuka International Racing Course in round 8 of 10 on the 16th of November. So coming on to our standings then, we told you about the winners from last time out, but what about the standings themselves? We begin then with the Elite Drivers' Championship, and we see our top 12 here, and Richard Simnor now with 2 wins back-to-back, leads by 20 points over Joe Nathan, but the DCW Racing and Rage Against the Game esports drivers are absolutely inseparable. It is going to come down to who puts it on pole, and it is going to come down to hundreds and thousands between the two of them. No, I'm not referring to the sweets, now known as millions, but previously known as hundreds and thousands. I'm referring to the fact that these drivers are so close on pace between the Ford and the Ferrari. Indeed, you'd think this is Le Mans 66 all over again, but in the modern era and going to multiple circuits around the world, and Simnor leads right now, but Nathan is looking to strike back. Casper Brunner sits in third, meanwhile, and really leads the rest of the of field for Old Dooted Cars, with a sizable 56-point gap to Ryan Davies, who returned to the podium last time out, and it seems though every time he does make his way onto the grid, he's able to find a podium. The Empire Motorsport driver is 44 points ahead of Javi Sierra, who had a frustrating day at Sebring by comparison with some of his rivals, and therefore be hoping for a much more positive day today. And Andy Jones, not back on the grid due to personal circumstances, but we do wish the Welshman well, and hope he's back on the grid for DCW Racing in the near future, because it wouldn't quite be the same without him. Helder Gonzalez as well for Tractix Racing now falls to 7th, not on the grid last time out, nor was Philip Schwerker, when the Ferrari Racing driver being followed up by Ashley Coupland, who's made a late start in the season, and last time out that 8th place, feeling a little bit frustrating as well, much like for Javi Sierra, but be hoping for a much more positive day today. And then Ulrich Scholl falls to 10th for Ferrari Racing, with Raz Harper and Sean Connor outside the top 10 there, but looking to make the way in, and Sean Connor, of course, making his debut last time out and having a solid drive to 5th place, just behind Raz Harper's 4th place, and both of them enjoying a good little scrap. But coming from the DDK Racing team and Connor Bros drivers, we come to the Pro class, and here you can see the Pro top 12. Well, right now, Mikey Storey leads the way by 100 points for Dexterous Motorsports over Tractix Racing Christer Halsoy, but how the fortunes were so contradictory. Storey had all the hard work to do to make his 4th win of the season stand. Meanwhile, Christer Halsoy, he was the force to be reckoned with. Until turn number 1 arrived, and suddenly, between Christer Halsoy and Christian Furze, there was contacted to turn number 1. The two took each other out the race, and that was it for their opportunity to try and take the win, but still they're able to bounce back, and Halsoy finished 6th, Furze finished 7th, but that means their championship charges have stalled. And meanwhile, getting very close to the back of Halsoy right now, only 6 points behind, which run up from last time out, America MA70 Esports is Christian Maltrek. Is there further? What is there? 64 points to Christian Furze. The Penderspec Motorsports shall be hoping for a much more positive outcome today, given the fact he's been looking fierce, but he's had 2 7th places, which have not been indicative of the pace he's brought to the table. Darren Sharple sits in 5th, Old Dooted Cars Blue, only a further 6 points behind, and only 2 ahead of Cy Anthony as the Welshman continues to oscillate in his form. Nathan Anstis as well in 7th, UKSimRacing Mansell, where he enjoys a brilliant back and forth battle between himself and Jack Barker, albeit the made for racing driver falling backwards than the UKSimRacing driver following a non-finish last time out at Sebring after some misfortune earlier in the race. When the Lamborghini Huracan driver opted to head to the pits, and that's where the car stayed. They couldn't get it repaired. Nathan Scott sits in 9th for Empire Motorsport, not on the grid last time out, but meanwhile who was on the grid but not on finishing was Peter Cox there for Slow and Steady Racing, who falls to 10th place. He's only 4 points ahead of Stephen Donnelly, who continues to move forward in the Haribo 4 Mustang for JSD Motorsports. Then you do have Ivan Sander for Pegasus Sim Racing, completing your Pro Top 12. From the pros then to the Premier drivers, and here we can see it's Samuel Clark who leads at Dexterous Motorsports, but his lead is being cut down little by little. Indeed, it seems as though if they were cutting down a tree, they didn't bring a chainsaw, they brought a very small axe. But Hendrik Zilke right now wields that axe, and he is gradually whittling away at the advantage that Clark built out in the first 4 rounds of the season, because 2 third places means that the Dexterous Motorsports right is starting to look vulnerable, and all of his rivals have riven to the charge. However, they've still got to get ahead of him, and that's what Zilke will be trying to do today, with the Old Dudes in Cars Blue driver taking his first win of the season at Sebring, and then feeling as though the momentum's with him. But Ricardo Luis Pereira could say the same, albeit not on the grid last time out, and therefore it does mean the SimRacing International Priorities of the Caribbean driver commits what was Sebring as a drop score, and he'll be hoping that this round he'll be back to winning ways. But from him, it's then a further 46 points to Alan Lever, 10th place last time out for the Lamborghini Huracan driver, and a very frustrating round of that for UKSimRacing Mansell, where nothing quite clicked. Joe Sparrow, meanwhile, once again finding that things did not quite click together, and having a race that was a bit of an uplift compared to previous rounds, such as at the Hockenheim Ring, but the JSD Motorsports driver 9, that 6th place, not representative of what he's able to do in the Aston Martin. Austin Graff, meanwhile, for Axis Simsport, another 7th place. He is becoming Mr. 7th at the moment in the Premier class. He sits in 6th with 278 points, the best part of 60 ahead of Luke Sherlock. And the privateer from the United Kingdom will just be hoping he can have another clean race after back-to-back 9th place finishes, and therefore he'll be hoping that incidents do not find their way to him, because we know he's got the pace, he just needs to stay out of trouble. Richard Jones sits in 8th there for Slow and Steady Racing, with the British-based team having difficulty at Sebring, and both of their drivers retiring from the race early on. And then we do see Rob Windsor a further weight 28 points behind for UKSimRacing Hill, with John Watt completing your top 10 there for SimRacing International, saving privateer Ryan. He wasn't on the grid last time out, but I can tell you who was for a brief moment. Old Dooted Cars Daniel Pays until his retirement, and the Portuguese driver there being followed up by Robin Pownier, who netted his first podium of the season after a 10th place in round number 4, where he's back to podium ways immediately as the smiling Swede, and you can never quite count him out as he sits in 12th. As for the Evo class, we can see Simon Hartley leads the challenge at the moment by only 2 points over Edward Berry. The Darkwing Racing with SimCoach Setups drive finally moving into lead with his second win of the season, a surprise win at that, and Edward Berry meanwhile settling for third place, albeit now knowing that a championship advantage he carved out in the first 3 rounds has been completely cut away. The UKSimRacing Hill driver is only 50 points ahead of the danger man for the entire class, and that is Thomas Weston. Not dangerous because of instant, but dangerous because if he's left to his own devices, his pace is absolutely staggering. However, I do believe he may be changing cars of this round, going from the McLaren to the Ferrari, and we'll be looking forward to seeing whether that is going to bring him some better fortune, because it's definitely fallen off a little bit at Sebring. But the privateers then followed up by the same privateer Ryan for SRI driver Joel Loudon, who making that switch to the Ford Mustang last time out didn't quite work out perhaps the way he wanted it to, but we're hoping he's able to settle into the rhythm of the American horse as of today. Because if not, Richard White's only 4 points behind after his second place finish last time out at Sebring, and would love to move into fourth place for UKSimRacing Mansell. Jordan Jones sits in sixth for DWR with SimCoach Setups, not able to net a result last time out. He wasn't on the grid, and we hope to see him back on the grid today, and he's ahead of Joseph Preston for JSD Motorsports, with these two enjoying a good little battle and rivalry, and well, Preston taking that fourth place, a very strong fourth place finish at Sebring, head of Daryl Giacovelli, the privateer who sits in eighth, head of Max Galgay, the split track esports driver not on the grid last time out, and being followed up by Paul Maffey, the Scotsman for Phoenix Racing, netting a sixth place finish in round number 5, but also not on the grid as of Sebring. Darren Giacovelli and Carl Tivoli complete your top 12 for Evo, and as we then make our way into the team standings very quickly, because we're about to get racing, well, what we can see in the Teams Championship, Dexterous Motorsports right now are leading by a growing margin, and indeed, if they carry this on, potentially at Suzuka, they could wrap things up if results do go their way. They do have the best part of 224 points of an advantage to UKSimRacing Mansell, and that is where the fight really begins. The fight for second right now could not be tighter. 44 points separating our second place team for Old Dudes in Cars Blue, and it's a further 50 points exactly to DWR with SimCoach Setups, and a further 36 to DCW Racing. But from there, it also stays nice and tight, because what we can see is that we do have Rob Windsor, James Connolly, and Edward Berry for UKSimRacing Hill sitting in 6th on 678 points. They are the best part there of what is 44 ahead of JSD Motorsports, and it's only a further 12 to Tractix Racing, who continue to try and hold on to a spot inside the top 10, but with the rhythm they're finding, it's not as easy as it sounds. Old Dudes in Cars, they sit in 9th on 588 points, well behind their sister team of Blue, but they are just ahead of same privateer Ryan from SimRacing International, who round off your top 10 on 540. But as for our host circuit, well, it needs no introduction, but we'll give it one anyway. It's the Grand Prix layout of the Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache, located in between the neighbourhood of Interlagos. That's the neighbourhood that's named after the fact it's between two man-made lakes in the city limits of São Paulo, in the São Paulo state of the country Brazil. We're a huge thank you to iRacing.com, not just their superb simulator, but also the absolutely brilliant track mats that are included within it. 15 corners, many of these iconic, where it be the Senna S's named after the home hero of motorsport, and particularly in Formula 1 of Ayrton Senna. That's turns 1 and 2 that give way to the Covered Soul of turn number 3, and the reason it's named that way, of course, is the fact in the original layouts of the circuit, it was the corner whereby as you drove through it at sunset, you would be blinded, and the name translates directly into the corner of the sun. Down the Retro Pulsar Straight, they'll roar and in towards turn number 4 for the Desida do Lago, and as they come through the downhill left-hander, it's all uphill from turn number 5 into the middle sector, which is the combination of sweepers at turns 6 and 7, hairpins at turns 8, 9 and 10, and then the rather nasty off-camber left-hander at Magulo at turn number 11. Before they head into Juncal Corner at turn number 12, a 90-degree left-hand right-angle bend. As they roar the way out of there, it's uphill all the way. Returns 13 and 14, it's all about torque and power, and to the checker flag line they'll go, or indeed another lap at the very minimum. But as we get ready to go racing, rules-wise, well, this is an open setup series with fuel loads restricted to 60% for all races. Qualifying, a closed qualifying format has been used, with drives home 4 flying laps available, and as for our race, it'll commence via a double-file rolling start as is the tradition, with there being 1 mandatory pit stop for fuel, changing tyres entirely optional, each drive has 1 fast repair available, and the only other time we'll expect them to come into the pits is if they've accumulated a drive-through penalty for 20 or more instant points. And all race journeys shall be conducted post-race. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's make our way to the grid then. And as all our drivers line up, how are they going to line up for our 7th race of the season? Well, as we can see, here in Brazil, Joe Nathan has struck back. He's found a way to get himself onto pole position for Rage Against the Game Esports, elite and overall ahead of Richard Simnor for DCW Racing, with a delta between the two of them being 1.5 tenths to that 1 minute 30.889 that Nathan's been able to achieve. Well done to him. This could be the moment of striking back. Meanwhile, it's taking pole position in the Pro class in third place is Christian Furze for Panda Spec Motorsports. Perhaps he's going to have some good fortune today ahead of Premier pole sitter of Ricardo Luis Pereira, which will feel as though it's a circuit from home. Again, the fact, of course, the national language of Brazil, unless I'm mistaken, is Portuguese, which is the country of which Luis Pereira hails from. But the SimRacing International Privateers of the Caribbean driver has a comfortable gap of what is the best part of 12 places to the next Premier driver, and filling in that gap first and foremost is Nathan Anstis for UKSimRacing Mansell, who has his best qualifying points of the season to date, ahead of Christer Halsoy for Tractix Racing by only what was then 17 thousandths. Then we do have Stephen Donnelly starting 7th for JSD Motorsports, the Irishman achieving a season best qualifying performance. And then we have your third place elite driver there, Casper Brotner, just ahead of Ashley Koopman for Relentless Racing. From the old duty cars and Relentless Racing drives, we then come back to the Pro class, and it's Christian Maltret there who rounds off your top 10 for Miraca MA70 Esports. And then coming into 11th place, we will have Mikey Storey there for Dexterous Motorsports, who has a very difficult qualifying session. His weakest qualifying points of the season starting 11th. He won't be too pleased about that. We then do have 5th place elite driver Sean Connor for Connor Bros, starting 12th, head of Jack Barker and Ryan Davies for Made for Racing and Empire Motorsport, who make up row 7. Row 8 will go to the likes of Matt Hoyland for Dexterous Motorsports, and then your 2nd place Premier driver of JST Motorsports, Joe Sparrow, where Hendrik Zilka started 3rd in class but 17th overall for Old Duty Cars Blue, head of his teammate Darren Sharples. Alan Lever starts 19th, and the UKSimRacing Mansell driver is in the company there of Dexterous Motorsports' Samuel Clark. And outside the top 20, we then do have Rob Windsor starting 21st for UKSimRacing Hill, head of Yavi Sierra, the lowest of our elite drivers thus far, and indeed the lowest of them all. And the privateer then will be followed up on the 12th row of the grid by Cy Anthony for UKSimRacing Price, and your pole sitter there for the Evo class of Edward Berry, who returns to the fastest ways over a single lap, and does so critically by half a second, or in fact half a tenth, let's get it right there, over Thomas Weston, who starts 25th. So it's going to be a bit of a battle between those today. Weston's not going to have it all his own way. We then do have Ross Young starting 26th for privateer ahead of UKSimRacing Hill's James Conley, with Richard Jones of Slans D Racing at round off your 14th row of the grid, and completing your top 30 is going to be Richard White for UKSimRacing Mansell and Jordan Jones for DWR with SimCoach Setups. That's your top 30. Outside of it, Daniel Pay starts 31st for Old Duty Cars, ahead of Simon Hartley for DWR with SimCoach Setups. And then we do have Darian Giacovelli starting in 33rd place, ahead of Luke Sherlock, with the privateer then being followed up by Joel Loudon, who starts in 35th for SimRacing International, same privateer Brian. And we do have alongside him long-term rival there of Joseph Preston for JSD Motorsports. And on your final row of the grid, starting 37th, it is going to be none other than Shane Connor for Connor Bros, head of your last starter, and that will be Daryl Giacovelli. Well, that's how the grid lines up, ladies and gentlemen. 38 drivers have made the trip to South America, and as we get ready to go racing in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the big questions are there. Who is going to go away victorious in class, and could this be a round that suddenly shakes up the standings across the board, where it being elite, pro, premier and evo? Well, there's only one way we're going to know, and it's over to Joe Nathan to take us to the green for 60 minutes of classic circuit-based action. And it's lights out and away we go as all our drivers are all the way away. And as they make the way down towards turn number 1, Joe Nathan there gets a good start. Richard Simnor looking around the outside but can't find it. We've got Luis Pereira there as well, fighting hard with Christian Furze. They make the way down. We look to the blimp camera, lovely view over the top. Somebody goes sideways there, Furze into the barrier. Somebody onto the grass there. It's Ryan Davies getting caught out there. The whole field tries to segue through. I think Joe Sparrow's been ejected out sideways. I believe it is Sparrow. Oh, goodness me. Somebody gets it wrong for the curve and soul. So Yavi Sierra dodges it all, albeit loses multiple places. And Richard White, through all the madness, has leapt into the lead of the Evo class as Weston and Berry have fallen backwards in each other, but it's not over yet. As you can see there right now, Richard White under major pressure as Cy Anthony squeezes his way between his teammates, and also the driver Thomas Weston is free wide here as they make the way on around, and as they come up the hill, well, free wide they'll still go here, and Cy Anthony right now might be regretting getting between the two what is Evo drivers here, as he has to back off, and does so in good time, because otherwise I think it would have been curtains for them. But Thomas Weston does take the lead of Evo there and has to be bold to do it, but lovely work, and Cy Anthony trying to send the message to Richard immediately, which is let me through, I need to get you out the way, and Richard White responds there immediately by letting him go. But goodness me, what a start. But as they all come through in towards turn number 10, well, right now the whole field starts to settle down. We're going to need to get some replays of exactly what happened right at the start there, because there was a bit of chaos and carnage amongst contact. And as all these drivers get together, I'm sorry to say, ladies and gents, we have had a bit of difficulty for Luke Sherlock, albeit I think he has survived most of the madness, because he is running right now 8th in Premier and 27th overall. So the good news is, if you're a fan of the Pennzoil BMW M4, well, it's still alive and it's still out there and it's not in trouble too much. Thomas Weston, meanwhile, is going very slowly there as he makes way up the hill. I wonder whether Weston's had a slowdown penalty applied. Alternatively, if he's got it wrong and just rejoined on the grass. I haven't got any information to say which way at the moment, but he's definitely had a bit of a slow moment, and we'll try and get a replay of what we can there. But after one lap, it's Joe Nathan who leads as he's just got behind in there Richard Simnor as they bolt their way down the top off the straight, and Simnor right there looking for the move immediately. But Nathan right now with all delivery correctly loaded this time for Rage Against the Game Esports. It's tried to hide itself so many times, but he finally got it on screen. Well, right now Nathan doing everything right as Simnor gives pursuit. Then you have your Premier leader in third place, Ricardo Luis Pereira, doing a fantastic job here in the early stages. Christer Halsoy leads in the pro class just behind him, and then you have Casper Rotner, Christian Maltret, Nathan Anstis. That's your top 7. Albeit they're going to swap places here potentially very shortly. It's Christian Maltret and Brotner. Brotner goes a bit deep up the inside, looks Anstis here. He wants to follow the guy in front of him through, and then can't quite do so. And as they come all the way down for turn number 9 on the outside line, that's not going to work for Anstis, and he'll have to back off and try again shortly. Meanwhile, Ashley Coulton sits in 8th, just ahead of Sean Connor. They've both survived the opening couple of quarters very happily and getting some overall positions. And then we do have Stephen Donnelly completing your top 10, and 11th place goes into the hands of Matt Hoyland. As meanwhile, your leader in Evo after what was the instant for Thomas Weston, it is now Edward Berry who's in 20th place with Daniel Page giving him a bit of breathing room here, or is he? Because that's Jordan Jones as Berry goes sideways, and it's going to be Page around the outside. My good lord, how on earth they all avoiding each other, I will never know. But that's some very good cat-like reflexes there for Jones and also Page. And in the end, Edward Berry drops down the order 3 places in Evo and 6 overall. But to be fair to Edward Berry, that could have been far, far worse. That could have seen him in contact with multiple other cars. And I think in here, Magulo Corda just being a menace, and that McLaren not having enough tyre temperature over the rear at the moment to keep it settled down. But as they head on to the next lap, will Berry right now try and get himself back together, and he's got Simon Hartley, last round's winner in the Evo class, behind him. Hartley's had a bit of a slow start to today, but now he'll be looking to pick up the pace, particularly when it comes to the fact he can see one of his big championship rivals right in front of him. But meanwhile, we've got a three-way scrap here between Sharples and Anthony. That is the 7th place in the pro class. And then Yavi Sierra just stays on the outside here. And I think he's just minding his own business at this point. Is the elite driver. He doesn't want to get too involved in this. Understandably, he'd rather try and work with them. But speaking of working together right now, there's no such sign of it here as we ride on board looking back from the leading Mercedes in this group in the Premier class. For 2nd place in class of Hendrik Zilke for Old Dudes in Cars Blue. He has got Samuel Clark and Alan Lever right behind, and Rob Windsor is soon going to become the 4th member of this party. I'm not quite sure what the French is for 4 people in a party. I know Menage a Trois does refer to 3 in good company, but right now when you had a 4th in there, well, Rob Windsor is looking to be right on the back of this. But keep in mind right now, Ricardo Luis Pereira has absolutely walked away, and well, onwards they go. And right now for Zilke, he'll be just thinking, can I make it at least another podium if not a Wednesday? Meanwhile, Samuel Clark will be thinking, I need to get 2nd, if not win this one, to get my championship back in order. And Alan Lever's going to be looking at some thinking, I just want the places as much as possible, because last time out at Sebring it didn't go well. Ricardo Luis Pereira meanwhile has already checked out of this one, but he's got a long way to go. And to be fair, we're not even 5 minutes into the distance yet, and anything can happen in motorsport, and it normally does. And well, of course, Sao Paulo, Brazil, a circuit not known to be the most predictable of circuits when it comes to racing, let alone the weather. Although I have been informed we have got relatively sunny conditions here today. You never know what can be around the corner, as Zilke right now holds on, for now at least, as he heads onwards. Just up the road from him, we do have Jack Barker, who's in front at the moment, and Barker falling backwards a little bit to these Premier drivers. Although I think Barker will just be grateful for the fact he's not had too much drama towards the start of this race. As meanwhile, in terms of pro drives fighting hard, well, that is Darren Sharples and Cy Anthony getting elbows out there, albeit neither drive pushing each other off the road at the moment, but Cy Anthony exploring the track limit with some value-added tarmac. And as they make the way on around through turns 6 and 7, and he's got a lot more confidence in that McLaren right now compared to Sharples, and it is showing in the fact he's able to take those outside lines and not worry too much. The only downside of all this exploration is he will be picking up some marbles on those tyres, and he will be naturally dirtying the tyre compound, which can lead to a loss of grip over the distance. Well, it doesn't look as though right now he's having too much difficulty as he stays nice and close, definitely trying to set up a bit of a move. As he does so, we come further down the order all the way to 33rd place, because here we do have Joseph Preston. In front of him, the 32nd place driver is Darryl Giacovelli, and behind is Darian Giacovelli. So it is a Giacovelli sandwich here. We're filling the Preston, and as they make the way on through turn number 10, right now Darian Giacovelli will be hoping that he can try to get Darian to get ahead of Preston. Albeit I can tell you one thing, that for Joseph Preston, he has proven to be a formidable racing driver, particularly when it comes to trying to make moves. He's going to go for one here as he gets a very good run at Juncal Corda. Darian Giacovelli there gets a little bit of understeer he has to offset, and Preston pulls ahead for now as we jump on board with the second of the Porsches in this pack. Giacovelli tucks back in then, tries to pick up the slipstream on Joseph Preston, but Preston right now up into 6th place in Evo class, and he's now starting to bolt away, goes defensive to the inside wall there, but I don't think he needs to really. I think that's a bit premature, and Darian Giacovelli does not have enough an overspeed here. Preston goes very deep, loses the rear of the car, and Preston ejects himself in this battle as quickly as he gets the head of it. Car backwards there into the tyre barrier. Thankfully it's a light graze, but any more than that and it would have been perhaps damage to the suspension, but Joseph Preston's going to be absolutely kicking himself for that one, as meanwhile it's a Giacovelli battle now, and that is going to be Darian making his way around the outside of the McLaren of Darrell, and in the end he takes the place of 6th and now tries to move onwards. Next target is Simon Hartley, who is 7.5 seconds up the road. But speaking of being up the road, we come back to the very front of the road and look to the class positions. And here are your elite and overall leaders. Joe Nathan and Richard Simnor still together. Simnor currently owns the fastest lap of the race at 31.46, but Nathan is only 400 slower when you round them up. So it just goes to show the fact that right now these drivers are very close to each other, and this is going to come down to strategy. However, if we have to start talking about strategy, we will very shortly. Well, we have a bit of an insight as to who might be the stronger driver on strategy here today. And, well, to give you a quick spoiler, it is the man at the very front leading at the moment. But as for why, we'll come back to that in due course. He sets a new fastest lap of the race as Joe Nathan of 31.42. But we need to take a look back at some of the big moments in the start of the race. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to it as we take a look back firstly at the madness at the start of the race. So this was everybody going green flag racing, and Joe Sparrow onto the grass briefly. And he's the focus of our attention as we saw a car in front of him get turned sideways. That was the Ford Mustang of Ryan Davies getting ejected out, and in the end a bit of side-by-side contact there between Sparrow, and it looked as though it was one of the Glass Tech racing machines, and then more cars sent sideways. But what exactly happened to Ryan Davies is the big question, and we take a look back at that. This was where it all went wrong for Ryan Davies, who was just in front at the time. Alternative camera angle there, and just a small tap with Jack Barker in the end was what sent him around. Sparrow took evasive action and ended up coming on at what was a difficult point and ended up ricocheting back across the road. Meanwhile, Luke Sherlock had a bit of insanity occur, I do believe. We ride on board here with the privateer. What exactly happened to him as he made his way down to that braking zone? And the answer is he made his way on in. Oh, goodness me. Well, it was a big concertina effect there and went straight onto the back of Joel Loudon. And in the end, we take some front damage, but thankfully, because of that, it actually slows him down enough not to get involved in all the madness that occurred afterwards. We did have Christian Furze get ejected out of the pack, as that was then another car parked sideways. Couldn't quite see who that was there. That was one of the Dexterous Motorsports cars, I can tell you. And as all drivers made the way down, well, this was Furze heading in towards turn number 3, loses it his own accord, their cold tyres, and in the end, the car going to the barrier and just shattering to pieces. And Jack Barker getting caught in a double whammy there with Joe Sparrow after the initial contact with Ryan Davies. So I think he's going to be absolutely gutted after that one. But that was some of the madness of right at the start of the race, ladies and gentlemen, no doubt about it. But we take a look back at what happened to Yavi Sierra last, but by no means least. He was one of the drivers who was right in the midst of this, who had to take a lot of evasive action. And in his evasive action, saw him make his way all the way around the Curva del Sol, and indeed make a whole trip around the sun practically, and in the end just about survive it all, even if he did have to have a little bit of a rub with Alan Lever. But without further ado, we're going to make our way back to your live racing, and we will be back very shortly. So as we come on back, there's plenty more racing to come, and that was a quick recap really of the open lap instant, because we did want to try and keep an eye on all of that, plus also all the racing that's still to unfold. So the incidents that have happened elsewhere on lap number 1 and also the first couple of laps, I think we're going to move on from now. But coming back to the consideration of strategy for Joe Nathan, why is he potentially the driver who's the favourite on strategy? If we had to base it from the opening 3 rounds, we definitely saw that the Ford Mustang in the hands of Richard Simnor was the faster car car on a single lap under race conditions, with the Ferrari being very close. However, if Nathan was chasing, he was able to do a lot of fuel saving, and naturally the balance of performance dictates that the 6-cylinder turbo supplemented engine of that Ferrari is a little bit stronger compared to the naturally aspirated 5-litre Coyote engine, the V8 of the Ford Mustang. The Mustang does consume more fuel, even when it's in the turn able to fuel save. So therefore, you would imagine that unless Richard Simnor can pull off an absolute bit of magic with regards to fuel saving, also some tyre management, he is going to be battling uphill here versus Nathan. So that's a strategic fault there. As meanwhile, we come back to your battle for pro lead, and that's Christer Halsoy ahead of the man who's our cameraman's focus, of Christian Maltrek in what is there, the red and white BMW that always reminds me of the Skechers livery Team WRT machine. I don't know whether that's inspiration or not. If Christian is in the chat, I'm sure he can tell us. But right now, lovely livery on the car for Miracle Academy, and as he makes his way on down. Right now, the 217 driver here staying right in the hunt of Halsoy. But for Christer Halsoy, you can imagine right now there's going to be a little grin on his face. If I know Christer well, I know that he doesn't let himself get too excited behind the wheel of the car in these series, just for the simple reason he focuses very hard. And of course, he did have that absolutely legendary run in the previous season of the GT3 League. But right now, he's going to be happy because after the disappointment of Sebring, which he was the very first driver to get out of the car and have a chat with Christian Furze and put his hand up and say, look, could have done a lot better with regards to what happened there. He absolutely owned it, did Christer, and right now he's absolutely owning this race in a completely different context, leading, but Christian Maltrek is staying right there with him, as in fact we say hello to Christer Halsoy in the YouTube chat, and I hope you're doing well, good sir. And in fact, we need to say hello to a good number of you. But right now, what we're going to say hello to here is Matt Hoyland looking for a move on Sean Connor, and well, Hoyland up the inside, bit of a door rub there. Hoyland making it very clear he wants to place for Vulcan and Fasters by Glass Tech, and in the end he gets that move done, and as he brings it on around here, well, right now Hoyland up into 4th place in the pro class. That was an overall place gain, to be fair, but an important one because now Stephen Donnelly's got to try and find his way past Sean Connor. And well, last time out, many of you may remember, Sean Connor spent more time fighting the pros and the premiers than he did elite drivers, but he had a lot of fun doing so. And right now I think he's going to be back to that again, but hold up a second, there's a change of pro lead. It is Christian Maltrek who takes the place of a Christer Halsoy, and that's come from turns 4 and 5, and up the hill they've gone. I think Halsoy just had a bit of a poor run by comparison, as Stephen Donnelly fights on the outside there versus Sean Connor to the inside of turns 6 and 7, and it's Connor still holding on right now, but only for a brief moment. I get the feeling right now we're going to see plenty more of this, as Connor's having to go absolutely defensive here. As they make the way down, the Connor Bros driver has a very poor run out Penihirio Corda, and that's going to enable Donnelly up the inside. And well, Donnelly there goes all in the brakes. He knows he has to there. Very heavy car, that Ford Mustang. It is not good on the brakes compared to the McLaren, and in the end decides to park it up the inside and send it. And well, that's the spirit, some would say. As he makes that place there, Connor will tuck back in behind and let's try and get involved once again. As meanwhile, we come back in the Evo class. And here we can see the whilst your top 2 in Evo, they've disappeared, of Jones and Loudon. Well, meanwhile, this is Berry and White fighting each other. And well, they come on down, and right now Edward Berry holding on, and it's going to be close. In fact, that's Shane Connor and Edward Berry fighting each other. Let me correct myself. Richard White's a little bit further behind there, albeit Edward Berry right now trying to make the move on Shane Connor, and it hasn't quite worked out. What is quite interesting, the fact we've had a little bit more of a change of what is the Evo class running order, and Edward Berry has fallen backwards, and Jordan Jones and Joel Loudon have moved forward. And well, we'll be keen to understand how exactly that has all changed, and we will see if we can find out. I don't think we can, unfortunately, at the moment, but I believe there has been a few off-tracks and moments for Berry and also Richard White that has propelled them slightly backwards, and therefore they've got to try and get themselves back in the running order. In terms of other individuals we say hello to in the YouTube chat, we need to say hello to Edward Berry there, who says hello race fans, and hello to you good sir. Also to Nathan Anstis or Anstis Races, also there to Jordan and Jones, also to Luke Sherlock and Sir Bottle Job, who cheers on Brazil there, and also to Budget Racing Noob, I believe that's Alan Lever, and also Grant Miller and Samuel Clark. Good to see you all here today, guys, and I hope you're all doing well. And if you are sat there right now, don't be shy, feel free to say hi if you haven't already, because the more the merrier, we like to say here, and the only biting we do is the biting of carbon ceramic brake discs in any series hosted by SimRacing International. But as our drivers all wind the way towards the end of the first quarter of the distance, they've still got 45 minutes to go. Well, there's definitely a few questions to be answered here, including for Luke Sherlock. Can he hold off the intentions of Ross Young in the very colourful liveried machine, the Scotsman, as he rides the back here of the Pennzoil BMW? They fight over 8th place in class, and as they make the way down, well, they've got a bit of time before they get to Shane Connor. who is the best part of what is 3 seconds up the road. But right now, these two enjoying a good little battle, and Sherlock definitely enjoying one of his happier runs of racing, whereas it's normally been quite bleak, and he's been involved in round after round where an open lap incident has caught him. He has got damage on the front of that BMW, but no means as bad as some of the damage we've previously seen him pick up, and right now I think he's going to be happy with the fact that he's actually running the race distance. Ross Young, meanwhile, would love to try and find a move, but I think he's now getting his first exposure of how powerful Luke Sherlock can be in that BMW as they go onto a length tour of the circuit under race conditions. Behind, you do have Simon Hartley getting very close to the back of this, and Hartley right now still trying to find his way in the Evo class. 5th place at the moment, your winner from last time out at Sebring, just not happy with the way the car is here at Brazil in qualifying, and right now with all the shuffle that's happening on the opening few laps, something tells me it might be going a little bit backwards. But to be fair, as we say hello to him in the YouTube chat, I know he's doing well. Right now, there's still plenty of time, and Hartley's not going to give up until the race is over, to be fair, and that can be said for so many. However, unfortunately, speaking of drivers who've had to give up the race, we have had 2 retirements so far. Richard Jones and Christian Furze have made the way into the non-finisher list. We still do have 36 runners, last of which is Thomas Weston right now, as he rolls his way on through in the Ferrari 296, and he is looking to try and find his way forward. However, unfortunately, he is a lap down effectively now behind the top 20 overall, and therefore he's got a bit of work if he wants to try and move forward. As he tries to do so, well, plenty more changes are occurring, and in terms of places that are exchanging hands, well, Shane Connors recently just had a bit of an off. Something tells me that might have been at turn number 10 as he tries to get that McLaren back in order. But what exactly happened to Shane Connor, we will find out in short order, because meanwhile, we've got some excitement happening here. This is an elite class battle for 3rd. Casper Rutner and Ashley Coupland fighting. Coupland in the Ford Mustang on the inside here into turn number 4. On the brakes he goes. Does he get it done? The answer is not quite yet. It's now going to be a power race up the hill, which the Ford Mustang has it in spades, but the BMW is no slouch either. So therefore, Rutner does make his way back to the inside briefly, and then lifts off the front and tucks back in here. And I think Casper right now playing the game of wanting to absolutely hug the backside of his rival as much as possible here, because the old dudes in cars driver knows that Ford Mustang is going to be drinking fuel by the gallon. I mean, on this BMW, he may just be able to use it as an opportunity to fuel save a little bit and also do some tyre management. Bearing in mind, of course, the leaders of the elite class, Nathan and Simnor, they are the best part of 9 seconds up the road. So therefore, really, they're in a fight for the first 2 places, and then you have these 2 drivers fighting for the final podium spot, with Sean Connor only 4 seconds behind, but separated from them by 3 pro drivers. So there is a little bit of an element here whereby both Coupland and Brotner have to be mindful that Connor could still get himself involved in this fight, particularly if he uses strategy to his advantage, and that's always one thing here in Interlagos. It's a very long pit lane, and therefore you want to spend as little time as possible in it, and well, that's an obvious statement, of course, but a bit of extra fuel saving here can be invaluable. But another thing as well that has to be kept in mind is the fact that this is a high altitude circuit, and that does sometimes change car behaviour, particularly in terms of cars that have turbos versus those that are naturally aspirated, because of course the fact that when you're at a higher altitude, you have less air for the engine to intake, and therefore that can change cooling. It can also change engine performance, and the turbo engines sometimes do perform a little bit better here compared to those that are naturally aspirated. But right now, Casper Rotner just tucks in behind, isn't able to find a way into this fight, as Nathan Anstis, meanwhile, in a very different livery today compared to his traditional one, the 296 driver, making his way on around with Matt Hoyland, are a very big thorn in his backside, and they do have 3 seconds to Stephen Donnelly, but they fight over 3rd in pro. And Hoyland right now, well, I don't know what he had for breakfast, but he started all the way down in 8th place in pro, and he is finding his way very quickly forward in this race, as meanwhile one driver who is really not having a good day at the office is Mikey Storey. We saw him sideways at the start of the race. We were going to talk about it, we weren't 100% certain. We verified that it was Storey, the championship leader of pro, who was in a lot of the incident at turn number 3 on the opening lap, but Storey's car wobbling all over the place there. No rear wing and no rear bonnet on it, and therefore it does seem as though the 9th place pro driver here is struggling. What exactly has happened quite recently is the question, and the answer is we can find out with a little bit of replay magic. So this was Mikey Storey making his way in towards turn number 1, under braking, tap to the rear there, and that was contact with, I believe, Daniel Pays. Storey rolled backwards to the barrier, and that's what's caused the rear wing to come off, and also with it the cover lid for the boot space. So therefore, Mikey Storey ejected backwards, and that's why he's lost those places after already his misfortunes earlier on in the race. We also had this for Shane Connor only a couple of laps earlier. This was Connor making his way up towards turn number 10 by his lonesome, and decided to pull the way over, and as he did so, unsettled the car, a little tap to the grass. Ooh, goodness me. And some very good reactions there from none other than Cy Anthony, and well, all the Evo and Premier drives that followed through afterwards doing well to avoid, and Shane Connor, to be fair, holding his brakes as any good driver would. So everyone working their way through that one, but not an easy moment, and we come back to your live racing. So back to it we come, and Mikey Storey into the pit lane for repair work. So he's decided to change out strategy, and I think in good time as well. And in good time we come to some fighting. Is this Joel Loudon under pressure from Cy Anthony? This is going to be a change of overall position as Anthony up the inside. Loudon made to go out wide for turns 4 and 5. Gets up back in immediately because Edward Berry is not too far behind, and I think Berry will be grateful to his teammate Cy in the fact that he has been able to gain some time as a result of that as they wind up the hill. But as they do, Richard White is only 1.7 seconds back. He also wants to play a role in this, and he brings with him Luke Sherlock and Ross Young, who still need to sort out who's going to finish 7th in that Premier class, at least at the moment. Oh, goodness me. Don't scare us like that, Luke, for crying out loud. That was a little bit of a dart to the inside there in towards turn number 9. I think that was more his line and the fact that he prefers to brake a lot later compared to Richard White in front of him. Difference of driver abilities, of course. Premier driver versus Evo. You would expect the Premier drivers will naturally be a little bit faster than the Evos, and they will be a little bit more daring into these braking zones. But there's daring, and then there's diving, and that was on literally the precipice of going from one to the other. As meanwhile, Richard White loses the rear of the car. He comes back, but where's he gone? He's still there for now as he rematerialises from the ether, but it is going to be a mistake that could cost him a place here overall. As Sherlock now, well, he won't have the slipstream to make his way through. He'll have to do this on Ferrari power, or on BMW power, I should say. And as he tries to make his way out the inside of the Ferrari, he will do as Ross Young, meanwhile, tucks in behind and can't find a way into this. So Sherlock up the inside, and that's going to buy him some track position versus Ross Young, as meanwhile, Young's now got to try and put his way past White. But you can see that the UKSimRacing driver not giving in here because he doesn't want to fall backwards to Simon Hartley. So therefore, these Premier and Evo drivers, they are literally alternating in terms of this overall running order. But in front of them, we do have Cy Anthony passing Jordan Jones. This is just important because what Anthony is doing, he is pushing the Evo leader backwards to Loudon by doing so. And Joe Loudon right now does not want an absolute rash on his back end of Edward Berry looking up the inside. And that is going to be Berry trying to take a peek here, heading up the hill in towards turn 6 and 7. Can't find it, but right now the top 3 of Evo are getting close, and then 4th and 5th are not too far away. So the Evo class is really coming alive here as these drivers continue to fight strongly against each other. And, well, all this fighting right now is going to lead to a very excited pit window, of which we have started to see that pit window open with the fact we have Mikey Storey coming in. He's decided to take his stop and a fast repair. He's going to have to do some fuel saving towards the end of the race to make that fuel tank last. But we are in the pit window for those who dare. But as you can see, using the circuit map in the top right corner of your screen right now with the car pack absolutely spread across the whole circuit. There is just as much a risk as there is a reward. If you come into bits and come out in traffic, you may lose all the time you aim to gain, and even more than that compared to your rivals who stay out on circuit and decide not to pit prematurely. So that's going to be the challenge now of picking a space on the circuit to come into if you can, and that's normally why, particularly the drivers inside the top 10, will play the natural game of not pitting until the fuel tank says they have to pit. But of course, Hendrik Zilka and Robin Powney demonstrating at Sebring last time out that sometimes going for the undercut, if you time it right, can prove to give you a 4 to 5 second swing to your advantage. So therefore, that's what a driver's got to be wary of, and they will have spotters on the pit walls, keep an idea of exactly where all the pack is and where those pit windows could be. But going back to the very front, Joe Nathan still leading ahead of Richard Simnor. Gap has not gone beyond a second since the start of the race. The highest it's been is 9/10, and that's for a very brief moment. And Nathan right now, literally they are swapping fastest sectors. Nathan's currently the fastest in subsectors 2 and 4. Meanwhile, Simnor's the fastest in subsectors 1, 3 and 5. Become the end of this lap, we may see it swing the other way. A 31.221 is now the fastest lap set by Nathan, with Simnor there at 31.308. Ricardo Luis Pereira, meanwhile, your leader in Premier, lonely in 3rd. Well, he brings the Pro Top 2 along with him, does the Premier leader. But right now, he's looking absolutely smooth as he can be for the Mobil 1 team as he heads on down. Matt Hoyland, meanwhile, he makes way at the inside there of Nathan Anstis to take 3rd place in Pro. That was in turn number 1, but Anstis coming back at him now as they make the one around. But the problem is running out wide there, Code of Soul. You increase the distance you have to turn through out of the window right now, and looking out my commentary box window instead, we do have Jack Barker coming to the pit lane, so he's decided to gamble on the undercut strategy. So we are seeing a few drivers there throw all their chips onto the table, but right now everyone inside the top 10 refusing to consider pit stops and instead considering fighting on circuit, which I think you have to at this point. There's just too much of a risk coming into the pit and finding yourself coming back out in traffic. But speaking of traffic right now, Joel Loudon and Edward Berry are getting very close together as we ride on board with your second place driver in the Evo Championship. Well, if he was to finish where he currently sits, he would move back into lead, but he wants a few more points here. And Berry right now all over the back of Loudon. And it's a 2.2 second gap to Jordan Jones. Berry thinks about it here under braking. Loudon goes deep. He's forced to go deep there by being made to think that it's going to be a send up the inside from Berry. Berry almost follows him off the road here. A little squeeze the inside in towards turn number 5. Up the hill they go. And Loudon right now is in the right place to defend this. But Berry's going to try and use the confidence in that McLaren to go all the way round. It's not going to work, however, surely, because what Loudon will do is put it in the middle road. But Berry goes to the switchback. He's quick on his feet, is Berry. And as they make the way down, well, now he goes to inside, then back to outside. Loudon's just got to hold his position and get the power down. But can Berry hang it all the way round in towards turn number 10? Yes, he can. And Edward Berry moves ahead, at least for a brief moment. But now Loudon goes to the cut back. But in cutting it so deep, what he does, he gives Berry a little bit of time to get into position. And going down from Magulo Corner right now, we jump on board with the 79 Ford Mustang as the SimRacing International same priority. Ryan Dry needs a good run here from Juncal Corner. If he can, he will be out slipstream draft his way all the way out towards turn number 1. And as he exits, well, it's V8 versus V8. One's naturally aspirated. You're right on board with it. The one in front, meanwhile, has a twin turbo system to supplement it. And here we go then down towards turn number 1. We've one defect to the pit lane. Or will they both stay out? They both stay out there. But here comes Loudon. It's American muscle all the way as they look towards the braking zone. Loudon thinks about going to the inside at the last moment, but it doesn't work there. He's got Luke Sherlock also to watch out for behind. And now looking to come down through that hill. Berry cements the position at least for now. We've had a bit of an incident for Richard White. He's had to tow to the pits off camera. We'll come back to that shortly when we can. But Joel Loudon again on the attack here. 2 attempts out covered or so. Down the retro poster. Is it enough? He'll be hoping. He'll be edging forward inside the car. He will be willing it forward there. Looks the inside, but Berry, unlike Loudon on the previous lap, does not run himself deep under braking. And Berry finally secures second place in Evo class for the time being. But my good lord, what a fight between the two of them. Absolutely on nails for an entire lap. And well, as we now look to the exterior pictures, I can see a number of you there congratulating the brilliant battling between these drivers. And we'll make no mistake, they may be in the Evo class right now, but that is a premier performance, no doubt about it. Meanwhile, whilst all that's been happening, we have had a lot of excitement in the Premier class. Funny we should mention it, because Hendrik Zilka in second place, well, he's moved into second ahead of Samuel Clark. And well, we might be wondering how exactly did he get the move done? And the answer is, here's a replay to explain. So this was Zilka at the time, chasing down Clark down the start-finish straight. A good run at Juncal Corner will always give you the opportunity here to battle on the brakes. And in the end, up the inside, and Clark not fighting this too hard. But you can see there, Alan Lever almost going into the back of Clark with the enthusiasm. And, well, that's the camera angle making it look as though he's going to make the contact. But Zilka on through, and Clark just settles for third. Let's go back to your live race and have a think about why he may have done that. And as we come on back, well, the theory, why exactly may have he gone for that? Well, we are inside the pit window, so therefore, you would imagine that right now Clark's going to be thinking more about, he doesn't need to essentially waste time with regards to fighting. What he needs to do instead is think more about the strategy here, and that could definitely work to his advantage because, of course, 3 different machines, a Mercedes, a McLaren and a Lamborghini. No, it's not the start of a motorsport-related bar joke, but as they make the way in towards turn number 10, right now 3 different cars, 3 different fuel usages, 3 different aspects of tyre usage, and 3 drivers here, all using different amount of fuel and all with different driving styles. It all adds up, and therefore they'll all be looking to try and gain on one another in the window that's coming up, in the fact that we do have 31 minutes of this race left as they head up the hill once again. But will we see any one of these 3 duck their way into the pit lane? Darren Sharples, the 6th place pro driver, is catching up to this as well. And he would love to help out Zilka, his teammate for Old Dudes and Cars. Will he be able to get involved? That is another thought. And for Clark and Lever in particular, they'll be worried if he gets closer because they won't want him to prove to be a little bit of a disruptive force. And to be fair to Sharples, he's a very fair driver. If he is going to fight them, he won't do it to the point of trying to run them off the road, but he is legally allowed to fight for overall position. There is no rule that says you cannot fight a driver of another class. It doesn't gain you any points, it just gains your overall track position. But the idea here is that Sharples may sacrifice a little bit of time in his own race, particularly given the fact that to Stephen Donnelly, the 5th place pro driver, he is 10 seconds behind. He might decide, you know what, I'm on course only to finish 6th realistically, so therefore I might as well help out Zilka where I can and try to get a bit more involved. But we will see whether that's the way it goes or whether Lever and Clark are able to just simply outpace him here, because right now the pace between these 4 drivers is very comparable. And as they continue to go deeper into this race and going now into what is the second half, if you will. So they're not decided to come on in yet. Those fuel tanks can go the best part of 40 minutes, depending on the circuit. We make our way back to Ashley Coupland in good time as well, because the Ford Mustang driver here, making his way up the rise for Relentless Racing. Well, he's definitely finding himself under relentless pressure from Matt Hoyland. And, well, as I said earlier, I don't know where Hoyland's found all this pace from, but he's gone all the way from 8th in Pro up to 3rd place in class, and right now has gone all the way from 15th on the overall starting grid up to what is 7th place. He is absolutely flying, as meanwhile Nathan Anstis has made his way into the pit lane, so he's decided to duck out of the running order for now. Perhaps he knows something that everybody else doesn't, and as they come down, it won't be the weather, but he'll know something about strategy that he'll be hoping nobody else is aware of, and he will be thinking that he can potentially leap his way up the order as a result of it. But the fighting has calmed down in most of the classes, at least for a brief period of time, but this is where things will start to get intriguing. This is where we build up to what will be seeing the strategic shuffle, and therefore we've just got to keep our eyes peeled. As Anstis makes way out the pit lane, quick pit stop for the team there, 17.5 seconds, quicker than most to be fair, and as he comes on down now, he'll make his way through the pit lane exit, which runs in parallel to turns 2 and 3. And well, he has to lift off the throttle a little bit through there, particularly when the tyres are warming back up. Otherwise, he'll find the rear of the car wants to let go, and he can create a traffic jam on the pit exit. And well, you don't want to become in the Hall of Fame by doing that. But he comes out in a very clear track. He's down in 17th place, 6th in Pro class. But most importantly, next car up the road is Ryan Davies, 7.5 seconds away, and he'll be very happy with that. But as they make the way up towards what be turns 6 and 7, we come back to the very front of the field. And well, the Nathan and Simnor battle still stands at 8/10 of a second at most. Joe Nathan still leading for Rage Against the Game Esports ahead of Richard Simnor. And right now, the Ferrari 296 driver is going to be feeling as though things are gradually moving more and more in his direction, because if he can hold on to this, I think he'll be very happy. Of course, they do have to negotiate traffic as well. They are gradually carving their way through the bottom portion of the 36 car field that's running out there at the moment. But right now for Simnor, this is going to feel positive. But meanwhile, speaking of positives, I'm positive that Samuel Clark has actually fallen behind Alan Lever coming out of Juntao corner. And as they head up towards turn number 1, here comes Clark looking for a move for 3rd place. In Premier on Lever here, he goes all in the brakes. Lever gives it the space. They both come through. Clark goes a little bit deep there, and Lever tries to switch it back, but can't do so immediately. But Lever now coming on through the corner. We ride on board the front bump here of the 183 as he looks to the inside, and it's Clark who gets himself all out of sorts, understeers wide. Down the top post they go. Keep it clean, gents, as they head in towards turn number 4. And Lever right now hard on the brakes. Clark's going to look for the cut back here. He's going to switch it to the inside immediately, but Lever there gets it absolutely stopped to the dime. But Clark's not going to take that as an answer as they make the way up the hill. Contact between the two of them, a little love tap there, and it's going to be elbows out all the way towards turn number 6. Lever right now has got the bit between his teeth, and this is allowing Zilka to open up a 2.5 second lead. There is the bottom of your picture, but Lever's still defending to the inside here right now. It is proverbial war between these two, albeit it's the friendliest war you could ask for. And as they come on down, well, Lever goes a bit deep. Clark's there, but can he get the door shut? He can! Almost, not quite. Lever's still there as he heads into the breakers over turn number 10. Clark then gives him the space, realising he was going to force Lever off the road. The fight's still not over, but I think it is now as they come on down through turn number 12. Lever does get back ahead. And what a bit of respectful racing there for Clark. He knew in the end that he'd effectively forced Lever to run off the road on the exit at 9. It was very close. It would have been contentious if it had carried on and it had gone to a steward's room as to whether it was Clark's right to close the door. But in the end, he gave the space to Lever, and it's ended that brilliant battle, at least for a brief moment. But now, as they pile the way down the start-finish straight, oh my goodness, how close Clark was there to tap in the rear end of Lever, and potentially even the tyre wall on the pit lane entry. And I think Lever there was trying to get Clark to go one way or the other, and in the end, Clark's coming to the pit lane and Lever stays out there. Now, I suspect Lever always wanted to stay out, but he wanted to get into Clark's head as much as possible. That's a fight. And, well, with 26 minutes left on the clock, I think it's going to continue all the way in towards what will be the second stint of the race. But Zilka right now, the 3-second gap. Well, he's been bought a lot of time as a result of that. And Darren Sharples now is going to be all over the back of Lever like this, and therefore be hoping that he can get involved and potentially now cost Lever even more time here to add to his misery. But as for Samuel Clark, he leaves the pit lane as quick as that. It's been a quick stop for the Dexterous Motorsports team. They know they've got to get their driver back out there as soon as humanly possible. But is it a problem as he takes a bit of grass down the pit lane exit? Well, that shows you how much it means to him as he roars his way onwards. He comes out ahead of Simon Hartley, who has yet to take a pit stop, and behind Luke Sherlock. But Sherlock is 1.5 seconds up the road, and relative pace would say that it's going to take Clark 2 laps to get right onto the back of him. So therefore, for Clark, he'll be hoping that Sherlock ducks to the pit lane in the next 2 laps, which theoretically realistically he should do, because that fuel tank's not going to go much longer. So Clark may have worked this out quite well, albeit he's going to be very fortunate if he has, given if he'd been off by a second, he would either be behind Hartley or he would be right on the backside of Sherlock. He has just slid into the gap there like a jigsaw piece. But as they all head onwards, well, I can imagine that coming into the pit lane, I think Clark decided, you know what, I don't want to fight anymore. The fight's going to be later on in the race. And in fact, I looked at the YouTube chat and he does practically confirm that, and saying, well, he thought, I can't repeat those words on the YouTube chat, ladies and gentlemen, but you can imagine he said politely to himself, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to sing to the tune of the UK SimRacing driver. Instead, I'm going to go my own way and head into the pits. But in the pits as well, we have Hoyland just leaving there. It's Stephen Donnelly still waiting to go for the JSD Motorsports team. But Hoyland makes his way down and out. Sharples is still out there yet to pit, but Christian Maltrek comes on through, so Maltrek returns to what is effectively, once all the pit stops are done, a theoretical second place at least for the Pro Class now. But we still have to caveat this because Christer Halsoy has yet to pit, although intriguingly, Maltrek, he comes out and he has got Matt Hoyland only what is 7 tenths behind him. Has Maltrek been involved in an incident of some description? Because that gap was nowhere near that close earlier on in the race. I haven't got anything to tell me that there's been a mistake for Christian Maltrek, but Matt Hoyland right now has really come on, and I wonder whether Hoyland is suddenly going to be a late contender for the win here in the Pro Class, because unless Maltrek's been involved in incidents pulled him away from Halsoy and we've just missed it, suddenly Hoyland has gained a lot of time to one of our 2 contenders to lead of the Pro Class. We will see. But as all the drivers coming around, well, meanwhile, Joe Nathan's into the pit lane. There he is, parked up at the moment, albeit you can't see him. He's a bit camera shy, and he's got none other than what is Richard Simnor right behind him. Meanwhile, Christer Halsoy carries on. He goes on to the leader lap of the race as the pro leader. He'll be very happy about that. But meanwhile, what's happening between Nathan and Simnor? Well, there they go. Literally both together here. You couldn't make it up. They're literally nose to tail going down the pit lane. And Simnor right now, who we ride on board with here, the DCW Racing driver's going to be absolutely furious. He'll think to himself, I've done all that, and I'm going to come out right behind him once again, literally on his rear bumper. You couldn't make it up, and this battle's going to go the distance then. Another 22.5 minutes of Ford versus Ferrari, but Ferrari in control right now, and Simnor's got to find a way to get ahead. But what can he do at this point? Because Nathan's done the hardest thing, which is hold on to track position despite being the leader through strategy, and he's done that perfectly, and Simnor is the closest he's going to be for some time. Can he force a move here as they head up the hill? We're on the way through turns 6 and 7 right now. If Simnor was any closer than this, he'd be in the rear of that Ferrari 296. And we'll make it the way on down in towards turn number 9 here. Well, right now, there's no real way in for Simnor, but you can see how close he's trying to get. He's really just trying to get into Nathan's head, trying to make the other elite driver think a move's coming. But Nathan at this level is not going to be easily outfoxed, and Simnor knows that. He knows that Joe Nathan right now will be as cool as him under pressure, and going down through turn number 12. This really is going to be a game of the smallest margins as they head into Juncal Corner, but now the tyres will be up to temperature. This is where Nathan, if he can get a good exit, Simnor will gradually gain, but he won't gain as quickly anymore, just for the simple reason that Ferrari does gradually build up a lot of speed. It's just that the Mustang does get to 6th gear a bit faster, but in the end, will that gap on exit being 3.5 tenths? Well, now 3 tenths here as they close the pit line, and heading up towards the checker flag line, it is going to be 2.5 tenths, and before the braking zone to turn 1, it's 2 tenths at most, but it's not enough there, and they stay as they were. Christer Halsoy, meanwhile, into the pits as he parks up. But we look to the blimp camera because, importantly, where is Maltrek? There is Christian Maltrek. Halsoy's leaving his pit box right now. There he goes. But Halsoy's going to come behind. Meanwhile, it's Hoyland up the inside. Hoyland goes to the lead of the Pro Class then. Halsoy's going to see this. He'll notice it out of his right-hand window that suddenly the Pro League battle is fighting only a couple of seconds up the road from him. But Hoyland gets ahead. There were daring dive to the inside towards turn number 1. And Maltrek immediately coming back. But Halsoy's only 1.2 seconds back. We're going to have a 4-way fight for the lead because Nathan Anstis is there with us. Maltrek comes blazing in. My good lord. He comes from that far back. Runs out wide. Hoyland retakes the pro lead again. But right now it's gloves up between these two. Halsoy's there. Nathan Anstis is there as well. Although his livery's not there. Somebody says in the YouTube chat. Fair play. But right now the McLaren driver is absolutely roaring his way onwards. And as they head in towards turn number 8, these 4 drivers, well, right now you couldn't ask for closer. We have got a 4-way fight for the pro win. And this is Sebring all over again. Albeit It's not Mikey Storey leading this one this time. It's Matt Hoyland who's come out of nowhere in this race to lead in pro. And right now, can he bring it on home? He's got 20 minutes to go plus the final lap. He's got to believe. But meanwhile, believing is seen. And here is and Lever and Samuel Clark fighting again. This isn't a repeat from earlier. You're not watching a replay. You're watching it live now as they make their way through. This time, Lever's on the outside to inside into turn number 10. On the inside he goes then. The Lamborghini driver using all the curb and more to rotate the car. He gets ahead for a brief moment and Clark is absolutely over the back of him. They are fighting so hard. Clark goes out wide there. That shows you the dirty air, how much it unsettles the car. And that McLaren's so aero-dependent. And indeed, as they make the way up the hill, he's just not able to find a way past where he's able to get clearly through. And there's Hendrik Zilko, who right now is 2 seconds up the road. You see him just go through the bottom of the camera for a brief moment. And therefore, Zilko right now, I think, will be feeling quite positive that he's able to break away from this. As here comes Clark again, looking up the inside. It's turn 1. Onto the brakes, they battle. Lever there, he tries to cut back in, tries to go for the switchback. But in the end, almost taps the rear of Clark. He's too close. Clark picked that right there, made sure that Lever couldn't switch back. Lever flashes lights there. He knows that this battle right now is going to carry on. A flash of lights there to try and get into his rival's head, sending the Morse code for "I'm coming for you." But as they head on down, there's no difference between the two of them. Meanwhile, Hoyland versus Valtrek with Halsoy 1.5 seconds back. These two absolutely baying for this win as much as they possibly can, with Christer Halsoy trying to stay with him, but Nathan Anstis is becoming an increasing threat. And that's before we talk about the lead of the Evo class here. My goodness, there's lead battles going on in all 4 classes right now. Jones is still leading. He's been leading since lap number 4, but right now Edward Berry's right there with him. Simon Hartley's only 4 seconds back. It could be a 1-2 today for DWO and SimCoach setups, but they need Hartley to get closer. But I think the only way that's going to happen is through Jones and Berry fighting, which, to be fair, my forecast is with Berry's pace and Jones not seeming to be quite on the same pace, they are going to fight, and Hartley could still be a part of this. And Richard White is only 5.7 seconds behind the full place Evo driver, so we could have a 4-way fight there. We'll try and keep the rest of all of them as we can, ladies and gentlemen. And as we look back to the front of the field, it is Joe Nathan and Richard Simnor still separated, but now the gap up to 4 tenths here as they head in towards turn number 4. The gap is gradually re-expanding again, but Simnor right now, you can understand, he's in the mentality, I've got to get this done sooner rather than later. That Ferrari gets stronger the longer it's in the lead, because of the fact it naturally has perhaps the better tyre life and also that fuel consumption, albeit they will have put enough fuel in the car to get it to the end. That's certain for DCW Racing. They don't normally make fuel mistakes when it comes into pits, but that gets very close in towards turn 8. My goodness, I think Nathan just outbreaking himself a little bit, and Simnor always following suit. But as they head up towards turn number 10, the point being, the longer it goes on with the heaviness of that Ford Mustang compared to the Ferrari, it normally does wear into its tyres and brakes just that little bit more, and that's where the Ferrari will gradually gain the time. But as they head through the last couple of courses to complete this lap, right now the time is definitely swinging in the favour of Nathan, and Simnor is running out of opportunities here. It may be a game of just staying behind and then hoping that some traffic potentially brings them together. As we say hello to Richard Simnor there in the YouTube chat at the perfect time, and I hope you're doing well, sir. But as they all continue onwards, well, meanwhile we come back to the battle of Lamborghini versus McLaren. Well, this wasn't on the script today. Indeed, as they make the way through right now, I don't think anybody could predict how close it's been between Alan Lever and Samuel Clark. It may be for 3rd place in the Premier class, but for these two, it is so much more. They are so invested in this fight right now, and you can understand why. For Lever, this is for as many points as possible to get himself back into the title hunt. For Samuel Clark, it's all about trying to hold on to the title lead. They both want 3rd so desperately, and Hendrik Zilka is only 2.2 seconds ahead. And the thing about this is, Zilka is not faster. He's slower in clear air compared to these two, and therefore their fighting is what's costing them the ability to close him down. That's not being rude about the old dudes in cars driver, but sometimes that's the way your race goes. You may be the slower driver, but if you get out of the battle, if you use strategy and smarts to stay ahead of it, you never get caught. And as they make the way through, they've just gained 2 tenths on Zilka coming through the centre S's. That's the point entirely. So right now, I wonder whether Lever's decided to put his smart hat on. And I think Clark's almost said to him, you know what, let's have a truce. Let's go chase down the man in front, because right now the Swiss is looking very vulnerable in that 2nd place, and suddenly there could even be more points up for grabs, presuming that Clark and Lever don't fight each other again, and Zilka doesn't find a little bit of extra pace. But there are so many question marks to this, no doubt about it, and right now we have got 15.5 minutes to try and understand what the answer will be to this exam question. Can this man Hendrik Zilke hold on for second place, or will he find himself brought back into a battle and then made to dig in deep for it all the way to the finish line? And well, as he tries to find a way through, well, meanwhile we come back up the order, and here is Ashley Coupland, who has gradually moved up into third place overall. The elite third place driver there. He's not had too much fighting with other elite drivers other than Casper Brotner, to be fair, in the early stages of the race, and Sean Connor. And right now behind him is the Premier leader, Ricardo Luis Pereira, who is just tucking in behind. And I can imagine right now for the Portuguese driver and also for Coupland, they'll both be thinking to himself, this is a race that's been very well driven, and it's a result that's very well deserved here, so long as they get it on home. And as for the Hoyland battle at the lead of the Pro Class, well, Maltrek, whatever he was throwing at Hoyland, he's run out of it because 8/10 is the gap right now, and I don't think Maltrek's going to get any closer at this point in time. As Halsoy, meanwhile, we ride aboard and look back for the rear of your third place pro driver. He has a growing problem, and that is Nathan Anstis getting closer and closer. And that's a very good run off the corner there from Anstis. All he has to use all the road plus a little bit of the white line. So if we will pick up an off track for that, but he's got the instant points to spare. He's going to look around the outside into turns 6 and 7. But Halsoy in the Aston Martin is just able to put the car nicely on the inside and pretty much says to him, what are you going to do? And in the end, well, it's going to be a look around the outside from Anstis, but he's going to run out of road there and find a lot of marbles. It's not going to work out at all. And Anstis made to wait just that little bit longer. And as he does so, we had a bit of drama further down the order. Thomas Weston has been involved in a bit of an altercation, and boy, his race has gone from good to bad to backwards. I'm going to get a replay of that shortly, but before we do, we come back to the Evo lead battle, and it's still Jones versus Berry. Two drivers heading off the road. They're using all the road plus plenty more. That's the Verstappen line, as we like to refer to it. And as they come out of turn number 4 into 5, well, Jones right now, he's under so much pressure. Berry's really following him here. And, well, the problem is for Edward Berry right now is he's getting so close that he's starting to do literally what we call follow the leader, which is wherever the lead car goes, you follow it around the circuit. You're a bit hypnotised by the car in front. And the problem is when it starts to go wide, you miss out on an opportunity to make the move count. We ride on board with the second place man in Evo. Simon Hartley is 5 seconds behind. Hartley is not catching up to this. He's actually falling behind it a bit more. So right now it does seem as though it's going to be Jones who has to try and hold on for dear life here to make sure it's a double podium, of which for DWR Supercoach setups, he's the one at the very top of the podium. Runs a bit deep there for Jinsal Corda. Can Berry get it right? Yes, he can. But Aston Martin's got so much traction there in second gear, and therefore just about holds on as they make the way up the hill. So close there to get it wrong. But in the end, Jones just able to use the torque of that Aston Martin to his advantage. Berry here close, but you can see the straight line speed differential. It's not enough, even with the slipstream. So he's got to look around the outside. Jones goes defensive, then pulls back to racing line. Legally allowed to. He is ahead. It's not considered change direction under braking. And we're coming down through turns 1 and 2. Jones gets a very nice run there. Berry on the follow-up now starts to build up in the slipstream, but it's just not close enough here to look for a move, or is it? When they come off the Curva del Sol, well, he is 2.5 tenths and closing little by little. Looking to the inside, trying to send a message here. Will Berry go all in? No, he decides not to throw in, but you see Jones there goes a little bit deep, slides loose there, and Jones falls off the road for a brief moment, comes back across. Berry now made to look to go to the inside here. It's going to be all about the uphill run now. Has the McLaren got enough grunt? Yes, it has. They head in towards turn 6. Can Jones hold it all the way around the outside? He's going to have to do this for 3 quarters now. He'll get to the inside of turn number 9. He's going still there as they head onto the brakes, but Berry's all in. Now Jones will have to get to the inside of turn number 9 as quickly as he can. He'll have to dart on the brakes, but not that the car run too deep. Berry then gives it the space to do so, and then Jones does get back ahead there. Berry didn't want to risk getting too close. Understandably, I think he was worried there that he might have had his nose pinch coming out of turn number 9, and they return to the status quo, but it's such a fight between these two, and right now there's very little in it. Berry is the faster driver, there's no doubt about it, but Jones is holding his own here, and right now Edward Berry just can't find the final 5% he needs to make the move land. There's so much action going all over the place, says Halsoy, and I 100% agree with you, good sir, as they head up towards another lap. 11 minutes still to go, then the lead battle for Evo very finely balanced, and meanwhile the lead battle for Pro, we're keeping an eye on that. That's staying static at the moment, with Ricardo Luis Pereira, the Premier leader, falling backwards into it. I'm not quite sure what's happened to him, but he has fallen back into the clutches of that quite recently. I suspect he may be deciding to back off a little bit and just take it nice and easy, perhaps and to save some fuel. Perhaps there's been a miscalculation of the fuel for the car, but either way, he's fallen back into that, and he won't be upset because Hendrik Zilke is still the best part of 16.1 seconds behind in the Premier lead. But that's off camera, back on camera. Jones this time having to go defensive very early here down the Retro Poster straight versus Berry. Berry here follows him on through, but you can see Berry's just got so much speed in these medium speed corners compared to Jones, but he just can't find the right time to use it, and that's the problem he has. He's learning, he's trying to find ways to deploy it, but right now, for every mile per hour he's got as an advantage, it's just not arising at the right time, and Jones instead is just proven to be so immovable here, as it's a repeat of the previous lap. Jones on the outside into turn 8, but defends nicely to the inside of turn 9. You can see Berry wait to sneak up the inside that time, but he couldn't, just for the simple reason Jones beats him to that apex and is willing to go all in on the brakes in that Aston Martin, even if it means overheating those front tyres and leaning on the ABS just a little bit more as they roll down from Magulo corner. And we ride aboard looking back for the rear of the 38 here, and well, right now they do say sometimes objects may appear closer than they seem, but trust me, the McLaren is not appearing closer than it seems. It is that close with 10 minutes left on the clock as they head uphill, and this of course is where the Mercedes engine of that Aston Martin is just able to give it a little bit more. The turbos coming in like the turbos of the McLaren, but now with Berry so close here, he's going to look around the outside halfway down the start finish straight. Jones defending that inside line nicely here as they head onto the brakes, but can Berry go all the way round? No, he can't, not at the moment. He's hoping that Jones mounts the curb a little bit too aggressively and costs himself time, but Jones just holding on here as then we come back up the running order. We leave this battle for a brief moment as we see both drivers there make a mistake, Berry a little bit more so. I think Jones is going to be safe this time in towards turn number 4, and well, we leave them for a brief interlude to come back to the fight for second place in the Premier class. And right now, well, it is Hendrik Zilka still ahead of Samuel Clark by 2 seconds, and Clark still ahead of Alan Lever, and well, their fight has come to a brief pause. Clark, of course, I think getting ahead and then deciding to go hunting after Zilka, who has now actually picked up the pace. So Zilka, I think, was managing his pace to manage his tyres a little bit and make sure he's got plenty of life left in that Mercedes. If Clark and Lever were to get close for whatever reason, if traffic was to strike against Zilka, he's got a car that's very ready to go for the battle, which Clark may not have, and Lever may have the same problem. They may have used up all the tyre life of the car fighting each other, they've got nothing left to fight what is Zilka for second place. So that's always one thing, and right now, well, for Clark, he's close, but not close enough to be in the tow. If he can get another half a second down, he will start to pick up a distant tow, and that may just help him a little bit on the longest sections of the circuit. We're looking further back to Jack Barker. Well, he had to have a front bumper replacement on that Lamborghini. That's why he came into the pit and also used it as a strategic pit stop earlier on. But the Made for Racing Sir Bottle Job machine right now is Darren Sharples for close company. Hold up a second. Who's that into the barrier there? That's surely not going to be one of our leading drivers in class. No, I think it's James Conley who's ended up in the wall there coming out of turns 4 and 5. Indeed it is. James Conley's gone around. We'll have to get a replay of that when we can. My skip to beat that. I thought that was Edward Berry for some reason who got into the wall there. Similar livery, different car, but right now, well, Jack Barker, the point being here, he's got Sharples for close company, and these two have fought each other in previous seasons where it's been the same class, different classes, but right now they're staying nice and close together as they roar their way up towards turn 12, or down into it, I should say, and Sharples, he's close to that Mercedes, but he can't find a way in. And will both drivers here today enjoy a better race. Barker, of course, having a little bit of a bumpy race towards the start with several moments of contact at the very start of the race, albeit something tells me Sardo's may be adjudged to be racing instance, and some of them he may receive a licence point or two, but then again, I'm not a steward. That's what the steward's job for. I'm the commentator, and well, right now for Barker, he's put all that behind him most definitely, and he's just heading on towards another lap. That's all you can do at this point, and focus on what you've got at hand, which is you've got Darren Sharples right behind you, and there is no way you're letting him run through, or at least that'll be his mentality and his game plan. Will that game plan work out? We will see, as meanwhile Matt Hoyland's broken away. Christian Maltrek has got Ricardo Luis Pera right behind him, and meanwhile Christer Halsoy has broken away from Nathan Anstis. But back to Barker we go. That was the Pro Lead update, and here's that fight for 6th place in Pro. Barker defending the inside here. Sharples trying to go all the way round. It's also for 15th overall, and in the end Barker holds his line. A little bit of rub between the two of them, but rubbing his race in that instance, and up the hill they come, and no change at the moment. However, I'm looking at the timings of the Premier battle for second place, ladies and gentlemen. Samuel Clark is now 1.2 seconds over Hendrik Zilka. We are keeping a good eye on that. And also, the Evo lead battle is still 2 tenths between Berry and Jones, with Simon Hartley slowly gaining again on it. So we are going to have a massive build-up of battles, and that's before you can start elite leaders. They are back into how they were at the end of stint 1. 8 tenths the lead from Joe Nathan to Richard Simnor. So I think we are going to have an absolute frenzy of battles here, and if only we could have a picture-in-picture view, but unfortunately we haven't got the technology to do so. So therefore we might be jumping between these battles as meanwhile Berry's up the inside there for the lead of the Evo class versus Jones immediately. But what's he doing differently this time? Jones is still there again. I think Berry this time has swallowed the bravery pill and says, right, I'm going to go around the outside of 9, inside of 10. Jones doesn't see it coming, to be fair, and I think Jones has been caught napping on this, and Berry gets ahead. Berry there takes the place. Jones is going to try and come back into 12, but it's not going to work yet. I think Edward Berry has just caught Jones out, and by taking a little bit of time to breathe and reset himself, Edward Berry there's got ahead. But now, here's the test. Uphill, can he beat the Aston Martin at where it's best? Well, it looks like he gets a good exit there initially, coming off the Juncal corner. He's now got to get it all the way to the turn 1. And as they make the way upwards, well, right now you can see that Jones closing little by little. That Aston Martin, it has received balance and performance adjustments this season, where its straight line speed has been gradually reduced compared to likes of the Mercedes and the BMW with the Ford Mustang. But Berry there goes a little bit deep under braking in towards the centre. S, that's going to compromise his line into the cover del Sol. He doesn't need that mistake. Here comes Jones then. Jones right now, well, I think he prefers to be the hunter rather than the hunted. That Aston Martin grille looming large as they make the way down the return posterior. Here he comes. The Aston Martin on the inside. So Berry now has to play the defensive card here. What can he do? He's always been the attacker. He's never been the defender. Jones up the inside. Berry goes to turn in, but he finds a face full of purple. And as they roll their way through turn 5, and Jones is back ahead, and up they go in towards turn number 6. It's so close between them right now, and it could literally be on the final lap a small mistake, which could be the separator between who the leader is and who's not. And that's where you consider Simon Hartley is still trying to play catch up to this. There he is, 3.5 seconds back. He's getting there little by little. I think he's trying to say to Jordan over the radio, hold on, I am coming, but you guys are too quick for me to catch up quickly. And that goes to show you the pace they're delivering as they make the way onwards. But as they come through, well, we also look back there briefly to Yavi Sierra, the driver who got elbowed out at the start of the race but avoided all the chaos and carnage. He's down in 23rd place, had a bit of a frustrating race, but good to see the 7th place elite driver carrying on all the way. And indeed, right now, I think he will have a bit of a lonely race to the end, but still enjoyed himself, no doubt about it. But from one elite driver towards the back of the field to the leaders who are heading towards the end of this lap, there's Joe Nathan and Richard Simnor. The gap now finally hitting a second for the first time today. We have not seen that, and after 57 minutes, they have been inseparable on pace, on strategy, and then it has come down to who put it on pole. And Joe Nathan did by almost 1.5 tenths, and I think that is going to be the separating story here, because the Rage Against the Game esports driver has just held on lap after lap. 3 minutes left. They'll do this lap they've gone on to, plus another one at least, and therefore we could still see anything. It's not over until he gets that checker flag, and Nathan will know that first and foremost for the American driver. As Simnor, meanwhile, falling backwards there and quite perfectly being put there, losing the proverbial DRS, says Christer Halsoy. And well, there's no DRS on these cars, but indeed the Formula 1 reference there of a second or closer. But meanwhile, speaking of questions about getting closer, as Samuel Clark has gradually dropped Alan Lever to 1.5 seconds, there you can see, and Hendrik Zilka, he is closing now to 1.8 seconds. So Zilka is under growing pressure. That last lap from Zilka was a 32.58, Clark a 32.8. So it does look as though right now, Samuel Clark, he is pushing, but he is pushing so hard that Zilka is responding. And Zilka, we said earlier, he might have been protecting the car earlier on. That's why the gap's never really grown. And I think that theory has proven true. I think he has got this right, has Zilka. He's decided to play the card of, I don't need to beat them by a large margin. I just need to beat them on the tyre life that's left in the race. Because this circuit, quite aggressive on tyre life, something we haven't really talked about today. You do need to protect those tyres as much as you possibly can here at Interlagos. It gives you life towards the end of the race. But meanwhile, there's life in this battle yet for 6th place in Pro. Barker versus Sharples, Ryan Davies being the popcorn seat spectator behind in the elite class. But these two pros continue to fight, and Davies all over the back of it right now, watching and waiting for a way to pro but in. Sharples looks up the inside, not really close enough there. That's more of a psychological move. But Barker trying to get Barker to outbrake himself, thinking it's going to be a lunge from Sharples. But to be fair, these two have raced each other for the best part of a year and a half. They know each other like they know their cars, and therefore they know when one's going to go for a dive and not. And that's the great thing about about this series. You've got drivers on this grid who have raced each other for the best part of 6 years in some instances. They know each other incredibly well, and therefore it is the closest race, the most respectful form of racing you can get, as our leaders have gone on to what we believe is the final lap, a 39th tour of the circuit. But Barker right now still holding on for a little bit longer as we are in the Jones-Berry battle for the Evo lead. Well, right now it's Jones holding on by 8 tenths. I think Berry may have just run out of steam here. I think he has finally just hit the proverbial brick wall and he can't find a way through it at this point. I think the tyres may have given up on that McLaren and Jones may have just done enough. But then again, they've got one more lap after this. And all it takes is one small mistake, and suddenly it could all open up. Speaking of which, coming out to the Curve del Sol, that fight for 6th in Pro. Sharples has got a run here, but here comes Ryan Davies as well. Barker's going to fight. He's got a Ford Mustang in the middle. It's going to be the Moses manoeuvre here from Ryan Davies. He thinks about it, backs off then, lets Barker bow around the outside, and well, Barker goes for it, but it's not going to work. Meanwhile, going back to the front of the field, ladies and gentlemen, because I think the checker flag is awaiting them. Well, here comes Joe Nathan to the line. Will it be a final lap? Richard Simnor is still 8 tenths behind. Through turn number 50 goes. The checker flag arrives. And for Joe Nathan, it is a return to the top step. It's an important win. And the pendulum swings to the Rage Against the Game esports header Richard Simnor's DCW Racing 4 Mustang. And then it will be a bit of time before Ashley Coupland comes on through to take 3rd place overall and elite 3rd place with it. But behind him, it's another Ford Mustang. And Matt Hyland surprises everybody today with his first pro win of the season and delivers from an 8th place starting class. Christian Baltrek across the line with Ricardo Luis Pereira. Luis Pereira takes the Premier win there in an absolutely monstrous form. Christian Baltrek takes the runner-up spot in Pro ahead of Christer Halsoy, who just holds off Nathan Anstis to the line. Casper Rotner with them. And then we do have Sean Connor coming through behind Stephen Donnelly to round off 11th place. And Hendrik Zilka manages to take the runner-up spot in Premier ahead of Samuel Clark, with Alan Lever falling in behind. Meanwhile, Jack Barker does in the end beat Darren Sharples to the finish to 6th place, literally by 300ths the line. We'll get a replay of that when we can. With then Ryan Davies just missing out. But what about in the Evo battle? We've seen all 3 battles as they've made the way through. Car off the road there. That is, I believe, unless I'm mistaken, Shane Connor taking a bit of an excursion. And Jordan Jones here makes his way onwards. And, well, Edward Berry has put him under pressure. The last time out, it was Simon Hartley who took honours for DWR with SimCoach setups. But Jordan Jones takes the win here today. And with it, I do believe, takes what is none other than his first win of the season. Despite all the pressure from Edward Berry, he's held on. Berry takes the run-out spot, and Simon Hartley behind Yavi Sierra will take 23rd overall, but make it 3rd in Evo and a double podium for the team. My goodness, ladies and gentlemen, what a race. And Daniel Pays will be your last lead lap finisher there in 24th place, as the rest of our drivers have finished a lap down there, starting with Ross Young and ending, I do believe, with none other than Shane Connor, who in the end finishes the race in 33rd, 2 laps down. But what a conclusion to the race. My goodness, an incredible race all the way through and through. We have got a few things we need to take a look back at, ladies and gentlemen, before we do start to wrap up the results, including, I do believe, the incredible battles that we saw. One of which was between none other than Christer Halsoy and Nathan Anstis for 3rd place in the Pro class, and also that fight for 6th in Pro between Barker and Sharples. Let's get a quick look back at those if we can, and then we will bring you your provisional race results. So I believe with the checker flag starting to wave, well, we did have Christer Halsoy here under pressure right to the finish line. These drivers were close, but as they made the way around, what you can see was Halsoy under huge pressure from Anstis, with Casper Rotner trying to get involved. Halsoy having to go defensive here all the way from Juncal corner, and at this point it's all about corner exit, of which, well, Anstis went around the outside, but that may not have been the move to make, because that Aston Martin more torque in the lower gears and therefore was able to start out accelerating the McLaren initially. And you can see that Anstis starts to fall back. He's on a wider line as well, and in that drag race he starts to gain in the last bit, but Christer Halsoy just holding on ahead of Anstis for the finish. And meanwhile, the Jack Barker battle with Darren Sharples. Barker got it wrong coming out of the final quarter, went out wide, and so Sharples was able to try and come back at him, but in the end, was he able to? The answer was no, of course, because you saw the gap in the end was literally hundredths of the line, but Sharples was almost there to make it happen. But in the end, Barker was always going to defend right to the wall and force Sharples to go around the outside, but there was only a certain amount of tarmac, and Sharples needed about 4 more meters to get the job done. Well, a brilliant end to the racing, ladies and gentlemen, no doubt about it. And well, we make our way back to your live circuit side pictures. And as we do, well, the circuit falls silent and does so as we now bring you those race results subject to Eddie Schur's inquiries. And here they are after an incredible 60 minutes race there at Interlagos in round number 7 of the UKSimRacing GT3 Championship Season 16, as brought to you on iRacing and proudly hosted by SimRacing International. And after the race distance, Joe Nathan returns to the top with winning ways there for Rage Against the Game Esports by 7.5 tenths over DCW Race's Richard Simnor. It was back and forth between the two of them over the entire distance of the race, but Nathan started on pole. He took pole in qualifying, and that is what separated them. Some would argue perhaps the traffic didn't fall favourably for Simnor. Perhaps he could have made his way through, because I'm hearing in my ear he did end up in a free wide on the last couple of laps to try and pick his way through. But the point being that for Simnor, in the end, he's had to settle for second and not make it 3 wins in a row. Ashley Coutland for Relentless Racing, when the absolute devil in the detail for the Ford Mustang driver, and brought home a very strong third place finish overall in Elite, ahead of Matt Hoyland, the Pro Class winner here today for Dexterous Motorsports. And what an incredible drive, having started all the way down in 15th place and what was 8th in Pro, comes through the finishing order to win in the Pro class. That's got to be one of the drivers of the season, ahead of Ricardo Luis Pereira, Premier winner, and then started 4th on the grid, settled for 5th overall, and with it, taking a Premier win for SRI of Privateers of the Caribbean, and that is the result he has needed for the last 3 rounds to keep his championship hopes alive. He has been needing it because the results have started to go against him, and he's shown that here today, he is one of the main contenders. Christian Maltrek, run-up in the Pro class. America MA70 Esports did a phenomenal job for the America Academy team in making sure that Christer Halsoy could not find a way onto the second spot. But the Tractics Racing driver in the end having to settle for third, and doing so happily, given the fact that he was only a 10th, if that, ahead of UKSimRacing Mansell's Nathan Anstis at a finish. But Nathan Anstis settling for 4th in Pro and 8th overall, ahead of Casper Brotner, with the Old Dudes in Cars driver being followed up by Stephen Donnelly, who completed your top 10. The JSD Motorsports driver getting closer to the podium in Pro, but today, not quite there, and strategy going against the grain. Sean Cotter, best to rest in a length there for Connor Bros, ahead of your second place finish of the Premier class of Hendrik Zilka. With the Old Dudes in Cars blue driver there, driving a very well-measured race to take that second place. After fighting for so long with Samuel Clark and Alan Leather, he got ahead and made sure he never fell back into the clutches. But what a battle. Arguably, while the candidates for the battles of the season, if not UKSimRacing's GT3 history, Clark and Alan Leather fighting each other non-stop with some of the most respectful and intense racing we have seen in the last 3 years. And in the end, Clark coming out on top in 3rd place in Premier. The Dexterous Motorsports driver will be absolutely smiling about that. Leather will be a little bit disappointed to have taken 4th in Premier, but 14th overall, he'll still be happy to enjoy it through such an incredible fight. And the UKSimRacing Mansell driver just ahead of Jack Barker, who was 6 seconds behind at the end and holding on to 15th by the skin of his teeth for Made for Racing. We'll now come a little bit further down the order after his battle with Darren Sharples with Sharples finishing 16th to your Evo podium finishers before we then do move on to the individual class finishing positions. And there you can see right at the bottom of the top 20, Jordan Jones, your Evo winner, first win of the season for DWR with Supercoach setups, and he'll be absolutely proud of that one, and having to do it the hard way as well, because right behind him was Edward Berry, who chased him every step of the way, but the UKSimRacing Hill driver in having to take second. He retakes the lead of the championship, but Jordan Jones and Simon Hartley will now both be breathing down his neck. Indeed, some of you may think this is quite familiar to the Pro Class Championship last season, in Season 15, where we had 2 teammates chasing after one championship leader, and what a chase it was. And then we did see between them and Simon Hartley, the 3rd place Evo finisher, Yavi Sierra, but then Hartley with that 23rd, rounding off the Evo podium there for DWR with SimCoach setups, a double podium for the team. Daniel Pace was your last lead lap finisher, and it was a lap down for Ross Young all the way through to what was then none other than your 31st place finisher of James Connolly for UKSimRacing Hill, and it was 2 laps down to Joseph Preston and also Shane Connor, with non-finishers as classified for Joe Sparrow, Thomas Weston, Darryl Giacovelli, Richard Jones and Christian Furze. But now what about the class finishing positions? Because this is where the points are scored. And we start with Elite, and what we can see is Joe Nathan, your winner in the end of Rage Against the Game Esports, and doing an absolutely brilliant effort to do so, with Richard Simnor riding his backside all the way through the race distance. Neither driver making a mistake, and in the end it all came down to track position. The DCW Racing driver meanwhile was comfortably at 15 or 16 seconds, I should say, ahead of Ashley Coutland, with the Relentless Racing driver in the end fights his way through to 3rd and not looking back. But behind him was Casper Brotner for Old Dudes in Cars and Sean Cotter for Cotter Bros, who round off your Elite top 5, with Ryan Davis and Yavi Sierra completing the class. Then in the Pro class, Matt Hoyland takes honours with the Dexterous Motorsports driver, taking the win by 5.3 seconds at the end. America MA70 Esports' Christian Maltrek and Christer Halsoy rounding off that podium for Tractics Racing. Nathan Anstis, in the end, just missed out on the podium by half a tenth, if that, and the UKSimRacing Mansell drive threw everything at it, including shedding the livery off the car in order to try and go for the move, but in the end, no matter what he threw at it, it wasn't quite going to stick. Stephen Donnelly was 8 seconds behind in the end, but growing stronger by the round as the JST Motorsports driver, and I suspect we'll see him on the podium before the season is over. Nils Jack Barkett in 6th place made for racing a happier day of racing today and enjoyed a good battle with Darren Sharples, who just missed out by a tenth at the finish. He took 7th at Old Dudes in Cars Blue, and it was the third 10 seconds to UKSimRacing Price's Cy Anthony, who was the last lead lap finisher. A lap down, it was Mikey Storey for Dexterous Motorsports, and how about that? Championship leader caught in a lap 1 instant, a further instant later on, and the Dexterous Motorsports driver will really consign this round at Interlagos to become a drop score for his season, and know that his championship lead will not be too heavily affected right now, but this could be the sign of a momentum change, or at least a levelling of the playing field, but we will have to see when we get to our next round. Christian Furze, your sole retiree, the Panda Spit Motorsports driver, unfortunately loses out on the open lap of the race and having to settle for that non-finish in 10th. And then in the Premier class, well, here we saw an absolutely dominant drive today from Ricardo Luis Pereira, the SRI Privateers of the Caribbean driver, never looking under threat from his Premier pals, and in the end taking an 18.6 second win over Hendrik Zilka for Old Duty Cars Blue. Samuel Clark, he took home 3rd place there for Dexterous Motorsports in his titanic fight of Unlever, with the UKSimRacing Mansell driver just settling off the podium, but the best part of 15 seconds clear of Rob Windsor, who for UKSimRacing Hill completed your top 5. It was then a further 30 seconds or so to Daniel Pace for Old Dudes in Cars, with a lap down to Ross Young, Luke Sherlock, James Connolly for UKSimRacing Hill, and 2 laps down to Shane Connor for Connor Bros, with retirements and non-finishes for Joe Sparrow for JST Motorsports and Slow and Steady Races Richard Jones. Then coming on to the Evo class, last but by no means least. And we can see here, Jordan Jones, the end, your winner for DWR with SimCoach setups by 1.5 seconds over UKSimRacing Hill's Edward Berry. But oh, it was so much closer all the way through the second stint. But in the end, Jones did enough to stay ahead. Simon Hartley took 3rd place, making it a double podium for the DWR with SimCoach Setups team, a further what was 6.5 seconds behind, and it was a lap down as classified for Richard White for UKSimRacing Mansell, who delivers another great top 5 performance, well clear of Joel Loudon for SRI with Sebring Privateer Ryan, and then Darren Giacovelli completed your lap down finishes in 6th, with 2 laps down to Joseph Preston after a late error cost him dear for JST Motorsports, and it was non-finish for Thomas Weston and Daryl Giacovelli. Well, that's a rundown of your provisional results, ladies and gentlemen, and goodness me, what a race it has been. But now, it can only mean one thing. It is time, sadly, for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now thinking, how can I get on the grid and enjoy all this brilliant racing action week in, week out like the drivers you've seen today? Well, good news, it's very easy to do so. All you've got to do is use the link at the bottom of the screen to join the official Discord, the beating heart of the SimRacing International community, and there you'll be alongside like-minded individuals from esports professionals all the way through to rookies, and there's never been a safer and more comfortable place to go racing when it comes to sim racing. In terms of the series we have ongoing, well, of course, you've been tuning in today to the UKSimRacing Community Sunday GT3 League, which runs on a weekly basis every Sunday evenings. But if you're a GT3 guru, but you prefer weekday racing, we can, of course, offer you weekday racing in the form of the Trophy.ai-sponsored GT3 Championship, which is in its 10th season that runs on Thursday evenings. But if you fancy a weekend race, but perhaps you fancy something a little bit different, well, on alternating weeks, we do have the America's GT Challenge Championship, which is a combination of GT3s and GTEs, the cars they replaced in World Endurance Championship and IMSA. And indeed, that may sound as though it's a combination for difficulty, but if anything, it's been one of the biggest successes that we have seen in terms of a multi-class series, and definitely do not judge it before you give it a try. Alternatively, if you're looking for something a bit more casual, perhaps something you don't have to pay to be on the grid for, well, we do, of course, have our free-to-join Practice League, which does run on Tuesday evenings and also Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock. There's never been a better time to be on the grid at SimRacing International, and for all that and more, all you got to do is join the official Discord. We'd also like to take a moment to say a big thank you to our league and series sponsors, who do include, of course, Trophy.ai, Carme, Modern Technology, SimCoach, where you learn your true potential as a sim racing driver, the GP2 Group, And last but by no means least, Motorsport UK's esports division for recognising us here at SimRacing International as a recommended community. We're very grateful for that recognition, and long may our relationship with Motorsport UK continue going into 2026. But speaking of things continue, ladies and gentlemen, we don't have to wait until 2026 for what happens next time, because next time out, we make our way all the way across the Pacific Ocean to Japan for the Suzuka Grand Prix circuit. And whilst round number 8 will occur on what will be Sunday, none other than the 16th of November 2025, you are invited to come join us as if it were live on Wednesday the 19th of November 2025, where we definitely have a lot more challenges to come in the championship charges. In Elite, Joe Nathan has struck back, and if he takes another win, he will level the playing field to Richard Simnor, given the fact that Simnor is still ahead of 10 points, provisionally. In the Pro class, well, with the difficulties for Mikey Storey today, it really does mean now, if Mikey Storey has another difficult round, the championship could all be turned upside down, particularly with Matt Hoyle and Sonny springing out of nowhere and coming to life. In the Premier class, Ricardo Luis Perez absolutely dominated today, but can he make it for 2 for 2 and suddenly put himself right on top ahead of Samuel Clark? And as for in the Evo class, it is anybody's guess who's going to be leading come Japan, because Jordan Jones took victory over Edward Berry today. Berry is back into the lead, but there is no clear pace setter in Evo. That's why you need to tune in next time, ladies and gentlemen, because there's going to be plenty of excitement at Suzuka on Wednesday the 19th of November 2025. But until then, we have been SimRacing International. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Brit in the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, like our drivers, remember to stay on track. Good night.